What is up, Saint Soldiers? We're here on Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak have survived the NFL draft and now getting ready for rookie minicamp around the corner and just breaking down the Black and Gold's picks, talking everything from Derek Carr, our interview we did with a sports scientist and former Tulane linebacker Sam Bruckhouse. We'll also go through some NFL grades as well, Jeff, and we kind of joked about it before we got on air, being part of maybe 100 men to take on a gorilla in battle. I would definitely step away from that. I want no part of taking on that strong of a beast who I think would just maim everybody.
You really wanted to get into that. And so here we are. Yeah.
It was hilarious to me what took over social media of late.
Yeah. All I know is I'm lining up in the back, right? Someone's got to line up in the front. Someone's got to line up in the back. I kind of have the same feeling about, like, if we are wrong about how zombies work, then all the brave people are going to die immediately and only the cowards are going to be left to figure out the rest, because everyone's going to be like, oh, let's go stab it in the head. And then what if that doesn't work? And anyway, all of our theories have gone. This is a weird way to start a Saints podcast, but here we go. Speaking of, like, trying to face down a gorilla is trying to diagnose a 9-person draft class and figure out, trying to assess every single one of these players in 12 minutes. But that's what everyone on sports media really wants to do immediately, is give everything a grade. And so we'll go through it. I think draft grades are the dumbest thing we do as a sports media, but they're fun to talk about. They're fun to get mad at. Everyone, not everyone, but a vast majority of sports media graders did not like the Saints draft. So we'll go through that. We'll kind of run down some of the top outlets, the Pete Priscos of the world that you only hear from like once a year, and it's to be mean to the Saints. Anyway, so we'll do it. But this first segment, we're going to get into what Derek Carr had to say this week. He spoke during a guest sermon at Church LV in Las Vegas. It's something he's done before. We've known that's kind of his go-to church. It's where he frequented when he was in Vegas as a player, and he kind of addressed the injury situation. He addressed some other things that have been going on with him this offseason. So we'll get into all that. As you mentioned, Sam Bruckhouse, who is a data scientist, not like, when you say sports scientist, I always think of those segments on ESPN where it's sports science. We're like, Charles Barkley can jump 17 feet with power of the he's got the wingspan of a bull elephant. Anyway, I miss those. Those were fun.
I love the Drew Brees accuracy one is legendary.
The one I will never forget is when they had Sasha Vujacic, who was a player for the Lakers, shooting with gigantic hands over his hand to simulate what it's like for Shaq to shoot a free throw. Anyway, they should bring those back. Anyway, this is about the Saints. So, Derek Carr, like we mentioned, out in Vegas, speaking on stage it's during a sermon. So keep that in mind. He is using information about his life to kind of impart wisdom based on the Bible. That's why it's framed in the way it is, because he's trying to make a larger point. Anyway, let's just listen to it, and then we will react to it.
I hate that I have to say this, but I have to say this. Yes, I have a shoulder injury, despite what ESPN says, and what some lady on a podcast might think. Okay, I have an MRI report to prove it. The team knows about it. We've been in constant communication. There's nothing wrong. We're figuring it out, and we're going to go forward with that. Is that okay? And I've been dealing with this, and I've been dealing with people lying about me. I've been dealing with them saying this and that, and I'm like, Lord, why do I have to continue to deal with this nonsense? Like, what is going on? I say that to preface with, you never know what someone's really going through. And so why do we continually try to attack people? And I would say attack people that are trying to do things maybe the right way. Why do we continually try? Why do we always have to have an opinion? Why do we always? Twitter and Instagram has ruined things for some people, because now all these people think that they have voices that have to be heard. And so, like, some people's voices don't need to be heard right now. I just got to be honest with you. Because not one of our opinions in here matters. Did you know that? The only opinion that matters is that text right there. It is the Word of God. And everything must bow at that.
So, Derek Carr speaking again. That was a sermon. That's why it's kind of framed. He's not making it's not a press conference. He's not answering any specific question. He's kind of speaking through that. So, but before we get to any of that, I do want to mention, I don't have the clip, but he went on to explain some of the things he's been dealing with this offseason. They took a trip overseas. The whole family got sick. It was something they'd been dealing with. Later on, I guess his wife, Heather, she was trying to light a fire pit at the house for the family, and like the thing exploded. She had to go to the burn unit. That was a whole thing. Then later on, she had a medical emergency. They had to rush her to the hospital. The doctors informed her that she had a miscarriage. They didn't even know she was pregnant. It's a whole thing. So, I think we can all kind of as a group, we should be able to have some empathy. If you can't have empathy for a family going through something like that, if you can't muster the tiniest bit of empathy for a guy that even if you don't like that person, to appreciate, like, that's a terrible, terrible thing to deal with, and kind of give them a little grace, then you're a monster and you're not who I'm talking to anyway. But so that's a lot, right? And so we've been asking a lot of questions. Why isn't he here? Why isn't he here for this or that or this or that? He said that when the miscarriage happened, was around the time he was scheduled to come to New Orleans to maybe get some answers, figure something out regarding the shoulder. And so that might be some kind of explanation as to why the timeline of this seems really weird. He didn't say when that all happened. So we don't know if it was earlier in this offseason, we don't know if it was recent, but that's information. And so if people have been asking a lot of questions, they've been saying, I don't have any information, whether he intended for it to be disseminated that way. I have to imagine he did, because he knows if you're saying that on a stage, that's going to filter out some way, right? And it didn't take very long. So, that's at least some level of information as to what they've been going through. So we can at least take that in, assess, and talk about it.
The one thing, Jeff, out of all that, I definitely feel for Carr and his family. Nobody in the world would want to deal with that with their family. He did say something that struck me pretty hard, that I've told my son, you don't know what someone else is going through, so don't be so judgmental on someone just because, there could be some extreme circumstances. I just wish, really, in all of this, because I'm guilty of making some presumptions too on Carr, the fact that either he or the team could have let us know that there were some personal matters that he's dealing with. You don't have to explain everything. I'm not expecting this full on, rundown of everything that happened to the Carr family, but just to say some personal things were going on and that we've been in contact with Derek, things I think would have been a lot smoother.
And he still hasn't done that. Like, to be clear, like, this is not that. This is not what that was intended for. And so, kind of moving beyond all of that, all of that, that's a lot to unpack, but kind of moving beyond that to the shoulder part of it. He still, to me, has not handled this offseason anywhere near the way that the highest paid player on your team, the starting quarterback for your team, should deal with a shoulder injury, a situation like this. Now, when we talked about this a few weeks ago, one of the only things that I said in defense of Derek was that I believe he actually does have a shoulder injury. And at that point, it was like everyone's coming out saying, guy's faking an injury. And it's like, I don't know, that's a pretty hefty accusation to lay on somebody without any real evidence. But, because you heard someone on a podcast kind of vaguely refer to it, and he's talking about Diana Rossini, who hosts Scoop City, a podcast with former Saints quarterback Chase Daniel, who did not explicitly say that she didn't believe he had an injury, but heavily implied that not all was as it seemed. I don't think she's made a statement beyond that. I'd have to check. I would love for her to change her Twitter bio to some lady on a podcast, because if she did that, she would win the internet for the day. But no, I mean, like, that's all. Like, I felt like at that point I was in the minority of like, no, I believe he has a shoulder injury. Like, I believe that a 30 or 4-year-old quarterback who has dealt with shoulder injuries in the recent past is dealing with something that's lingering, that he has to decide whether he wants to play through it or get surgery and fix it now. And that's a decision that, we can, like, people are like, well, why didn't you have surgery earlier? Well, for one thing, I think what they're going to say and what David Carr said on NFL Network prior to the draft is because he was doing the other rehab, he didn't throw as much until later in the offseason. So it was a little later that he found out. I kind of question that, because what we heard late in the season was that he was working to come back. Was he not throwing then? it doesn't make any sense that he wouldn't have thrown. So I question that. But what I don't question is if you are a 34-year-old quarterback, whether you have surgery in the day after the season ends or you have surgery 2 months before the season starts, which we're still pretty far away from the season starting, you're probably out for the next year. Like when you're talking about pitchers doing Tommy John surgery, for example, like no one's like, well, maybe he can get back midway through next season. It's almost always like, all right, erase next season, see you in 2 years. Because especially for a throwing position, you either have it or you do not. And watching it, like you're not rushing back. So I think like people be like, well, why didn't he have it done earlier so he could get back? If Derek Carr had a surgery this offseason, he's not your starting quarterback next year. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like either he's going to have the surgery or he's not going to have the surgery. If he has the surgery, then you move forward with whatever you need to do. You probably go out and find a veteran backup quarterback option and you figure it out. Tyler Shough, Spencer Rattler, whatever is else there. If
Ben DiNucci's gone.
Ben DiNucci is gone. We meant to. There was some news that we meant to go through. Ben DiNucci's gone. The Saints signed Chris Rumpf, defensive end that has experience with Brandon Staley. They also cut Ryder Anderson, a guy that no one probably even knows his name. But so if he doesn't have the surgery, then it becomes a completely different question. And Mickey Loomis kind of gave us the answer. If he can play, he'll start.
Right.
Or at least he'll be the presumptive starter. Because I think right now, what the Saints are trying to do is keep their options open on the table for whatever comes next. Because they're paying it. They benefit nothing from alienating Derek Carr from the current situation. And if they can keep him as a bridge, they're going to want to do that. And they want to be able to say, okay, our best option is Derek Carr starting. If that's the case, then we're going to start him. This is what, and so I guess before we go to Bobby, we have a take from Bobby Abear that I want to play, but what just kind of give me your thoughts before we do that.
No, with Carr's situation, yeah, we're kind of just now in, wait mode to find out how serious is this shoulder that, might or might not need surgery. And like you said, if he is going to go through with surgery, you're clearly going in a different direction there. If he is not and going to try and play, which he has implied that he wants to do, I agree with the Cannon and pretty much anyone else who's in that court that he still, whether you like it or not, gives the Saints the best chance to win if Derek Carr is the starting quarterback. Yeah,
I think there's more to it than that, but let's hear what Bobby says and what Bobby had to say, and then I just want to add to it. So here's Bobby Haber.
Even though we drafted Tyler Shough and you look at the quarterback room, Mickey Loomis has said this, and I've said this, that if Derek Carr is healthy, that's the word if he's healthy, he's a starting quarterback this year. Nothing against Tyler Shough and all that. Now, if he's not healthy, I think made a best man win. I think it's more Tyler Shough or Spencer Rattler, and we got to wait and see what would happen. But you still could be trending in the right direction. And the Saints, when you think about this, they won 5 games. Let's say they win 3 more and we're 8-9. Don't you? Well, I'd say we're trending in the right direction, but what is that? And then you're not in the postseason. And who knows, they might draft a quarterback again next year. I mean, you got to get that position right. You get spoiled with Drew Brees and the stability there. But you just don't know. You got to let it play itself out. That's why I'm intrigued. You look at the OTAs and you look at minicamp. They're not going to give it to Tyler Shough just because where he was drafted. No, he's going to have to beat out Spencer Rattler. All I know is right now, who we perceive as healthy, you take out Derek Carr, has any of those cats won an NFL game? No. So, that's why we got to slow our roll and our expectations.
Yeah, so, Bobby, he's really echoing what Mickey Loomis said, which is, hey, if Derek Carr's healthy, he's going to be your starter. And I think it's about more than because like Bobby said, if you get better, and get to 8-9, are you going to feel better about the situation? Is that really winning games only goes so far, I think. But what I think the Saints want to be in a situation for is if Tyler Shough isn't ready, which you'd like to think that a guy coming in at 25 years old is ready. But what if they don't think he's ready week 1, right? What if they feel like he would really benefit from however long, 3 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and you don't really have a good option to be a bridge. Like a second-year quarterback is not a good option to be a bridge because here's the thing. If Tyler Shough and Spencer Rattler go out there and battle and Spencer Rattler wins that battle, that's a bad look for the draft pick. Even and it might just be we want to give him a couple weeks at the NFL level to adjust before we throw him into the fire. But that's not how it's going to be viewed. It's going to be viewed as, man, you're quitting on your second round pick already, right? That's why, like, if Derek Carr was Andy Dalton, we would be like, yeah, of course. You throw Andy in there as the sacrificial lamb. If he's able to get something done and you win a few games, fantastic. Otherwise, what's the realistic scenario? Like, I'll go back to a Kurt Warner with Eli Manning. Like, Eli Manning was the number 1 pick in that draft. The Giants gave up extra assets to go get him, trade for him from the Chargers because he big-timed the Chargers in their trade for him. He didn't start for them week 1. They signed Kurt Warner, who at that point everyone thought was washed, was wearing 2 gloves. And then, they cut him. He ends up going to the Cardinals, goes to another Super Bowl with the Cardinals. So he still had some juice left. But no one watching the Giants during that period thought that he was even going to get to the end of the regular season as their starter. It was like, it's just a question of, it's not if, it's when Eli takes over that job. And so I think the Saints would much prefer to be in a situation where they could go that route if they need to go that route, if they feel like that's the best route to go. And the fact of the matter is you're paying Derek Carr either way. Derek Carr doesn't want to be a bridge to a rookie quarterback, but the Saints want a bridge to a rookie quarterback if they need one. And so that's where I think you probably are. Like, you don't want to be in a scenario where you have to start the rookie week 1. Now, like, there are situations that exist. Russell Wilson exists. He started week 1 and it was never an issue. Dak Prescott exists. He started week 1 and it was never an issue. Brock Purdy, you think if Brock Purdy started week 1 for the 49ers, he would have been ready to go? Almost certainly not. Pat Mahomes, Alex Smith, perfect scenario of a guy who actually had success as the player in a bridge scenario, and they still moved on from him. They went to the playoffs with Alex Smith, but everyone understood, like, the higher upside player is sitting here on the bench. And I don't think they knew at that point just how high upside he was, but it was like, there's no question he's going to be that guy. So, another Texas Tech guy, which I think is interesting. 3 quarterback factories at this point: Oregon, Texas Tech, Louisville. He's been all 3 of them.
Right.
So that's where I think it's like, it's not necessarily just about who gives us the best chance to win. It is what gives Tyler Shough the best chance to succeed. And Bo Nix is the guy I should have mentioned. Like, he started right away too, and like the Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Bo Nix. But those teams, I think, were in a better chance to succeed immediately. So, like, that's a long way of saying, like, the reason the Saints want Derek Carr back is because he's an asset that they've already paid for.
Yeah.
And every team in this scenario would like to have a veteran that they could use as a shield for a rookie. The Saints would like to be in that scenario too.
Yeah, you mentioned, with Russell Wilson over at the Giants. I'm curious that situation, how it's going to shake out. Does Jameis Winston end up, a cut over there? What's going to happen with Kirk Cousins over with the Atlanta Falcons? There's still some veteran QB options that I think we don't know their current availability. So I guess you would say, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is in the mix here at all. He might be that break in case of emergency kind of deal with Pittsburgh. If he decides to go that route, we'll have to wait and see. But with the Saints, I am curious what that veteran QB option will be if it isn't Derek.
This is just an aside, and I don't have an answer to that question, to be honest. I don't know if it's out there in terms of a veteran QB option. You might have to trade for a guy. But if you're looking for a game to watch that's really kind of fascinating in retrospect, go watch the 2022 Tax Act Texas Bowl between Texas Tech and Ole Miss. Quarterback for Texas Tech in that game, Tyler Shough. Quarterback for Ole Miss in that game, Jackson Dart. Running back for Ole Miss in that game, Quinshawn Junkins.
Yeah.
One of the running backs for Texas Tech is Sir Thompson, who actually signed with the Saints as a UDFA that year. John didn't make the team, but it's still kind of funny to see that in retrospect. Tyler Shough dominated that game. He ran for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, threw for 242, I think, and threw for a touchdown. Did have a terrible interception, but But, it's just kind of a fascinating game to watch in reverse. And it's also a game like people like, why did he get injured all those times at Texas Tech? You watch one game of that Texas Tech offense and you understand, like, man, they are exposing the quarterback all the time. There was a play, 3rd and 1 near midfield. The Cardinals, Louisville's up 21 points at that point. And they run a quarterback draw up the middle, which he takes it for 36 yards, straight line. It's the perfect play to be like, when are you ever going to run 40 yards in a straight line in the NFL? Well, that exact play. But also, why are you exposing your quarterback who's already dealt with injuries that year to a massive hit up 21 points in a bowl game that doesn't actually matter? He's supposed to be your starter for next year, and you're exposing him in that scenario. And so, like, that's why you go to Louisville, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that to you. And suddenly he stays healthy. So that's one of the reasons, like, I don't overreact to the injuries, because you are not doing him any favors by asking him to play like Lamar Jackson. But he can run. Like that's one thing. When you go back and watch, and I know he just transitioned sharply to Tyler Shough, but that's what I want to talk about the rest of the way. When you go back and watch Tyler Shough at Oregon and Texas Tech, you will stop saying this guy's not athletic. You will stop saying he's a statue. Like, I've heard people say that. It's like, he's not. He played more like a statue in the Louisville offense because they wanted him to play like that. But he's an athlete. Like, again, that bowl game, he had over 100 rushing yards. That doesn't happen by accident. And keep in mind, sacks count against you in college in terms of your rushing yards. So when you're looking at a rushing total in college, understand that every time you take a sack, that number goes down. That doesn't happen in the NFL. That's why rushing totals for the quarterbacks seem way higher in the NFL. All that said, like, Tyler Shough should be as close to ready as a prospect can be. Will he be is another question.
Yeah, though, one of those takeaways from the draft was sad. The Saints didn't get that, big body receiver, and was thinking maybe possibly after drafting Shough, you could get a guy in Ja'Cory Brooks, who was his main man in Louisville, but the Commanders ended up scooping him up. Seeing some of that, YouTube game footage you're watching that I watched the things, they had a pretty decent connection. It was like, maybe the Saints take a flyer on Brooks, but ended up in Washington, unfortunately. So they're not pairing up with Shough here.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how he works with Rashid Shaheed, how he works with Chris Olave. This is what Archie Manning had to say about Tyler when we talked to him on the radio on Monday.
Arch, talk about how much it makes a difference where you're playing and who's coaching you. I think, friend, it's your grandson, Arch Manning's had a great situation with Sarkisian at Texas. But look, so was Tyler Shough at Louisville with Jeff Brom. It's an NFL offense. They're running it's an NFL offense. So it's not like the transition where you're just doing RPOs and you're really not learning how to play the quarterback position.
Yeah, I think that was super good. It probably had a lot to do with him, him having this good year of catching scouts and coaches' eyes, and also watching him run that offense, and knowing that it's one that's going to be beneficial to him as he goes into pro ball.
Archie, one of the things people bring up is about his age, and you can kind of kid him a little bit about that, but we are starting to see the last of the COVID 2020, because that counted almost like a nothing year. And it was really beneficial to Tyler because it gave him another year to prove it. But that is starting to wane away now, 2020, and that you could use that, like it didn't even happen, like it was a disappear year. I think for Tyler, he couldn't have asked for anything better going from Oregon, where he was a backup to Justin Herbert. Then he goes to Texas Tech and he had some injuries, and then coming to Louisville. The 2020 COVID year really benefited him when I look at the draft more than anybody. Now again, some guys, they don't like the overage quarterback, but come on, today the way you keep yourself in shape and you don't get hurt, you can play 10 or 12 years.
And Archie, they don't hit the quarterback. I mean, so if you're 26, let's say you play 10 or 12 years, isn't that hitting the lottery for an NFL team? So 10 years. He's going to be 26 in September. He's only going to be 36. I mean, I don't know how long you play. I played till I was 37. So, I mean, hey, look, your late 20s, early 30s, that's kind of when you peak and you know what you're doing, and NFL defense cannot fool you. So when they look at, like, they're making way, and, they say, like, no one ever brought that up with Spencer Rattler. Well, when you look at it, Tyler Shough's only 1 year older. I mean, so no one's even bringing that up.
I'm like you. I don't pay attention to that. To me, that's not a big deal. And there's no assurance when sometimes you get a kid that comes out early and he says, oh, he's just 21 years old and all there, but still he's probably not ready when he's 21 years old. You get a 26-year-old that's had to fight through things like Tyler has. He's a mature kid. This is a tough thing with the Saints. We don't know what's going to happen at the quarterback position. If he happened to be thrown out there, he's better prepared than most. It's tough. It's a tough transition. I don't care how old you are or how much football you've played. It's a huge step, but I think he's very qualified, and I absolutely love the pick. I thought the pick was just fantastic.
Yeah, and so Archie Manning obviously knows Tyler pretty well. He went to the Manning Passing Academy twice, both, I think once with Oregon, once with Texas Tech. Didn't go in his year with Louisville. Is it Louisville or Louisville? I need to ask Jeff Duncan that. What's the preferred way?
I was always told you got to say it like you have marbles in your mouth. So Louisville. Yeah, Louisville.
All right. Louisville, Kentucky. The Fighting Jeff Duncans.
I do appreciate, too, speaking of Louisville, Tyler Shough. I know you saw it, too. I was either X or Instagram, that picture in the background when he posted his, coming to New Orleans, can't wait to give it all to you. But the 28-3 in the back, if that's intentional, bravo, Tyler Shough. Way to ingrain yourself immediately to the Who Dat Nation.
If I could give him any piece of advice coming to the Saints, it's that whether that was intentional or not, plain
say it was.
Because no one's going to question you, and you're going to win over half the fan base on one moment alone. Just say, I thought it was funny, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And even if it's a lie, I don't care. Because if all you do is embrace hating the Falcons, you will immediately win over. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's going to be a decent percentage of the fan base. It's what Dennis Allen never understood.
And made it just worse that one time, obviously, with the whole Jameis incident.
Right. That's my point. Is he never got he didn't understand. That was his moment where he could have won over a lot of people, and instead he completely just
went the other way.
Blew it. But no. So Tyler, I feel like this is my prediction for what's going to happen with the Tyler Shough of it all, and this is I've been thinking about this, and people haven't watched Tyler Shough. Like a lot of people have, but I think most people that spend time watching him play are like, okay, I kind of get it. Like you start to understand like, oh, no. There's some really good tape in there, and there's some really good measurables, and overreacting to the age and the injuries is a little bit like missing the point of he's a good quarterback.
Also overreacting to the two plays that just keep being on a loop on social media.
Right. You don't see the good plays. You only see those the two back. Like if you reduced everyone's tape down to their 10 worst plays, you're going to be like, wow, this guy can't play quarterback in the NFL. Yeah. If you reduced everyone's tape down to the 10 best plays, you'd be like, this is the best quarterback of all time. So it's got to be somewhere in the middle, right? Anyway, so right now people are reacting to limited information. I think once people get to know his personality, once, he kind of ingratiates himself a little bit, people are like, oh, okay, cool. People will start to appreciate him a little bit more once they get to know him. We're going to go out to training camp. And you're going to go out there as a fan, or at least a lot of people are going to go out there as fans, and they're going to see what it looks like to have a 6'5" quarterback who is built for the position, towering over Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. Going out there and seeing clearly over the offensive line, not standing on his tiptoes, especially if you got Trevor Penning in there at left guard at 6'8". Good luck seeing over that guy, Jake Haener, right? You're like Kyler Murray. You think he could make it happen with a 6'8" left guard or Russell Wilson? No, like that's one of the reasons you want a tall quarterback so they can see over the line. And you're going to see him go out there. He's not going to have to take hits. He's not going to have to do a ton, and he's going to make a bunch of really great throws. and people are going to be like, wow, this is insane. I can't believe this is happening. Everyone's going to react to the highlights they see. And then on ESPN and all these talk shows, they're going to be like, wow, what, this is so crazy. Who could have seen this coming? 2 months ago, this guy was terrible. And now he's the talk of the NFL. And so he's going to get overhyped. And you're going to get this reversal where everyone's not willing to just admit I was wrong. They're going to say, who could have seen this? This is so stunning. Then you're going to get to the point where this is where I want Derek Carr, because you're going to go into week 1. And if he's your starting quarterback, he's going to play like a rookie and he's going to struggle at points. And then you're going to have to be like, well, I guess he's not as good as we thought he was. And I'm like, no, he's right there in the middle of what reality is. But right now we're absurdly low on him. In 2 months, we'll be, I guess 4 months, 3 months, whatever. We'll be way too high on him. And then we're going to get to the regular season. He's going to play in the middle and it's going to seem like a collapse. And that's why I think you benefit greatly from a sacrificial lamb at quarterback. And you could call it bridge QB. You could call it a veteran QB. You could call it the QB that gives us the best chance to win. That's how I see this going. Because again, I think once people get out there and fans get out there and they see him play, he's going to look great in camp. He's going to look great in practice. What he needs to prove is whether he can go out in a game and navigate NFL pressure and NFL game speed. But you don't have to do that in practice that much. You simulate it. You're not getting hit. You're wearing a red jersey. They're not allowed to hit you. So if there's any gun shy to his game, if there's any scared to his game based on the injuries, we won't know about that until the games start. So that's kind of how I see it now. And that's why I have been trying to get people ready for this pick, to explain why they're going to make it. And for whatever reason, despite me getting a lot of these picks right over the last several years, everyone's like, you're wrong. This is not going to happen. And then it does. And I'm honestly glad Jackson Dart's not there when they pick, because if they did take him over Jackson Dart, it would be this whole nother level of insanity. So all that is to say, like, I'm looking forward to people going out there because I think they're going to be impressed when they see him in person.
No, I text you at one point. I'm like, I'm ready for the Shough versus Spencer battle this training camp to see how things unfold. The biggest, we talked a little bit, mentioned Atlanta. They were in the news though, getting fined by the NFL for prank calls, baby. Yeah.
Jack Ulbrich is not a, I mean, I don't, that, you're a dad. I mean, I've done some things to piss my dad off, right? Like I would consider myself to have been a decent kid, but like there were some things that I did that made my dad want to throw me off out of the second story window. He didn't, just to be clear, he didn't do that. But I don't think I ever did anything that cost my dad $100,000 in one night.
And like, to me, he's a kid, but he's 21. He should definitely know a lot better.
He's an adult.
Yeah. This isn't like a 16-year-old here.
He is a grown-ass adult. And here's the thing, like, I'm Jack Ulbrich, or I'm Jeff Ulbrich. I was just coming off an interim season. I probably want to be a head coach someday. You think that's going to come off well in those interviews? No. Like, if we give you privileged information on your iPad, you're just going to leave it hanging around the house?
Right. I don't know what your jackass kid.
I meant to talk about that at the top. I forgot. Jack's ass kid, yeah.
Jack's ass. Just a little funny storyline that, thankfully it's on Atlanta and definitely not, the Saints not involved in this one in any way.
I mean, the Falcons, like, either they're getting fined $250,000 or they're losing a draft pick every year, it seems like. What the fuck? Anyway, yeah, like they got fined $250,000 for that. So Jack Ulbrich, like, he's lucky they're not making him pay. If that was me, that's what my dad would say. He was like, all right, good luck earning $100,000 to pay me back on your $0 a year salary without benefits, babe.
I just know that, I wouldn't have had the money either. My dad would have taken that out of my rear end, though. That's for sure.
That was like a top-notch Office reference that
it really just went on me.
I wish like there was an Office super fan on this podcast with me, because they would have been like, nailed it. Anyway, that's it. We're going to wrap up this segment, this incredibly long segment that was not supposed to be this long. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We're going to come back with an interview you did with Sam Bruckhouse, former Tulane linebacker, data analyst for Sumer Sports, kind of break down what he saw in the draft from an analytical perspective. We get a lot of opinions and emotional driven stuff. I thought his insight was interesting because, the sabermetrics of it all, like what are they telling you? So we're going to hear from him. Then final segment, we're going to break down draft grades. So who dat? Thanks everyone for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Otherwise, we will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Do that. Ring the bell on YouTube. Hit us up wherever you get your podcasts. Hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can find Steve at Steve Geller WWL. Or you could even follow the show at Saints_pod. Wouldn't say we have the greatest personality on that show account, but maybe someday. Maybe someday we'll turn into Wendy's or something. But
we're going to have to get onto Blue Sky soon, I guess.
I
know, more social outlets. Exactly.
As if I need another wall of information flooded at me. I can't even manage like Facebook and Instagram now.
I'm right with you too. It's like I've been so dreading to even download it and sign up.
I mean, like people don't know anything about me because I don't share any information about myself on social media. Claire makes fun of me all the time. Like I'm constantly on Twitter. I'm constantly talking on Twitter, but I'm not like telling you what I'm doing. Like maybe like once every few months I post something to like remind you that I'm an actual human person, not just a robot, not just like an AI chatbot on Twitter.
Yeah, we saw you running a marathon.
It was a 10K, but yeah. Only like a quarter of a marathon plus 2.2 miles. I have run a marathon, and that's when I ran that, which I hit my time, by the way. I hit the time I was going for, which I was proud of. I was like, it reminded me just how stupid running a marathon actually is, because at the end of that's 10K, which myrtleized me. Like it would be like it would be like getting to the end of this 6.2 mile race, and then having someone be like, actually do that 3 more times. And then when you're done with that, come and see me because we got another 2 miles for you to run. Hell no. I'm not doing that. Anyway, so we're back to the Saints. We're reacting to the draft class. It's funny because it feels like, we're past the draft. We're like 4 days removed from the draft. There's 9 picks. Still got to learn a ton about. We're going to have rookie minicamp coming up. So we'll have a ton more discourse and conversations we had around these picks, around these UDFAs. But for now, let's kind of loop back to the draft, an interview we did Sunday with Sam Bruckhouse, who is a great guest, by the way. Like he's a guy that should be more mainstream as an analyst that he is, because he's got great insight, great information. Former Tulane linebacker, data analyst with Sumer Sports, which, we don't talk to Jeff Eric Eager as much as we used to, because he is now with the Panthers. But Eric Eager, who kind of helped co-found PFF, also co-founded Sumer Sports with former Falcons GM Thomas Dimitroff. So it's a really, really high-level data analysis firm, basically, that is meant to inform NFL teams of the trends that they need to be watching for. So he's got a lot of really interesting information. So let's hear from Sam.
3 days of the draft, and helping us break all that down, Sam Bruckhouse, former Tulane linebacker, now a Sumer Sports senior NFL analyst, and also a data mad scientist, joining us here to help us break down these picks. Curious your thoughts. So I'll start with the Saints and their second round selection of Tyler Shough, making waves, a lot of folks around the NFL, and just curious what you think of the Louisville quarterback.
So there's certainly pros and cons to this selection. The pro is that, number one, typically in the data, we have a problem where we never know which quarterback will be correct. You try to pick the guy who will fit your system the best, and it seems that is what Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis did with this selection. When you draft quarterbacks, it's kind of like rolling the dice, and I'm glad they did it, especially given, the questions about Derek Carr. We also have Spencer Rattler on the roster. It will give the Saints many options at the quarterback position, which is so important. The only item that I would criticize a little bit is typically when you start getting out of expected draft position range. All these teams have models, and the public has a model as well. Tyler Shough was kind of pretty far away from that selection. It was a little bit of a reach. I thought they could have waited a little bit longer. But at the same time, the quarterback pressure that teams feel is immense. You never know when a run is going to happen on quarterbacks, and everyone needs one. So all around, I'm okay with the selection, and I'm excited to see how Tyler Shough performs in mini camp. Just a little bit of background on him. His superpower is not getting sacked. And I know throughout the most recent years, sacks and negative plays have killed the Saints offensively, especially last year where we were able to get our run game kind of going, and then we'd hit that negative play. Shough avoids negative plays, and I think that's going to be the key for his success at the next level.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about reach because it's like, okay, you're picking at 40, then you have a pick at 71. So would people have preferred not picking him at 40 and then giving him more assets to go up from 71 to wherever you felt comfortable with? So it's kind of tough because if that's the quarterback, you got to go get him. I do think that's an interesting point because I hear people talk about throwaways. And one thing that I think young quarterbacks in the NFL struggle with is the understanding of when a play is dead, when to dirt a ball so that you can live to play another down. Like Caleb Williams, for example. It's like half the sacks he takes seems like, dude, the play's over. Like, I get it. You can extend a play. You did this in college, but you're hurting your team. The game against the Vikings last year was an example of that, where they went to I think it was overtime. He took a crazy sack after holding onto the ball for 10 seconds. And so I think, like, the context has to matter. And when you talk about an older quarterback, he's 25, going to be 26, coming into the NFL, I don't view throwaways as a negative trait. I view it as a pro-ready trait as long as the throwaways are not panic-driven. And I think that's the concern with Tyler is he sees pressure, and at times you see on tape there's a little bit of panic. But there's also some really good tape of navigating pressure, sliding out, keeping his shoulders square so that he can release the ball. He can get a quick release, even rolling away from his arm side. So I'm just like, I think that's an interesting conversation to have over, okay, a lot of throwaways, but throwaways aren't necessarily a negative thing.
Yeah, and we highlight this really beautifully on SumerSports.com. You can go to our draft guide and check out some of the draft picks that the Saints have made. And we basically have it broken down. When he drops back to pass, what ends up happening? And so he has a really, really low scramble rate, as you were kind of highlighting, one of the lower ones among NCAA quarterbacks last year. But he has a pretty good sack rate. He's not taking bad sacks. And as you noted, the way that he gets out of pressure is by throwing the ball away. We have those further broken down with pressure. Again, the pressure to sack ratio is excellent. Even when he does receive pressure, he's not going to take a sack when it comes down to it. Typically, he's going to limit those negative plays. And frankly, we saw Bo Nix, for example, and I think that's kind of the path to success, even though Bo Nix did have a little bit more upside scrambling to a certain degree. But we saw Bo Nix last year be able to totally limit sacks. He was one of the players who lost the least EPA, expected points added, basically putting yards in context of down, distance, and place on the field. He lost the least EPA. That's why he was successful, even in the face of, having some struggles with accuracy, not necessarily, being a top quarterback, but because he limited his sacks so well, and also was able to make it into other plays. That was his superpower. It's the same kind of formula for Tyler Shough as well.
Sam, we talked to you about positional value, and the Raiders taking the swing with Ashton Jeanty with the 6th overall pick. His rookie contract worth approximately $32 million, fully guaranteed. It's the second highest paid running back in terms of guaranteed money in the NFL, and that was kind of what you had warned about, taking a running back that high. Same thing with like the tight end position. The Saints going with Kelvin Banks, though, left tackle. It's obviously, in terms of the money paid out to the position, a premium position. Your thoughts on the selection at pick 9?
So when I go back and look at the great Saints years, even all the way back to the Super Bowl year, the kind of hidden story is that they just had excellent offensive linemen. I'm talking like 2 or 3 Pro Bowlers. My background on my work computer that I'm looking right now is the Pro Bowl year with Michael Thomas and Cam Jordan. And you notice that Teron Armstead and some of these other guys were Pro Bowlers during that time. So I think what the Saints are trying to do, and I think this is the real takeaway from the Eagles. It's not necessarily that the Eagles got Saquon Barkley. It's that they have 3 borderline Hall of Fame linemen and potentially 5 Pro Bowlers. At least one got paid. The one that wasn't a Pro Bowler, Mekhi Becton, went to the Chargers and got some serious payment as a result of his efforts. And I think that's what the Saints are trying to do. Here's a little bit more about Kelvin Banks. I think teams were substantially higher on him after the combine than the media was. I think the media got kind of caught up in Armand Mimbu's excellent combine performance and immediately, as a result, projected him to be the second best tackle. He did end up going second, but as we saw, tackles were flying off the board. And, when I talk to our scouts that we have at Sumer Sports, they also think that Kelvin Banks can swing across the line. He can play guard. Obviously, we have Trevor Penning, and we also have Fuaga, who were highly drafted as well. He can play guard. He can kind of play all over the place. I just think it's an excellent pick because more and more we're starting to see teams go after these swing offensive linemen, and they always end up being excellent players. And here's another item that I got from teams. Obviously, we don't necessarily have character grades here at Sumer Sports. When I was talking to my friends who were data analysts, they actually picked up that guys with super high character grades end up being excellent swing offensive linemen. There's a pretty good correlation between that, or at least a correlation that they felt was important. And Kelvin Banks is one of the highest character guys in this draft class. I think when you mix the character aspects, the positional value aspects, and then the idea that he can play multiple places across the line, and he was immensely productive in college, it was just a good, by-the-book, strike pick.
Looking at things, Sam, I think the biggest, newsworthy stuff from the draft was definitely the fall of a guy like Shedeur Sanders that was documented. I think, some were expecting the Saints to take him at 9. Then he ended up, all right, he's going to get picked by the Steelers at number 21. And then when that didn't happen, it was like, uh-oh, where's this guy going to land? But I don't think the drop was expected to be that dramatic. Curious on one, what did you think? What happened in that situation there? And two, what are the Cleveland Browns doing taking, 2 quarterbacks in this year's draft class and how they end up?
Again, I'm a data scientist. I try to limit it to the data. So in my standpoint, this was clearly kind of a one-of-one event that had other things going on. You look at Shedeur Sanders' data profile, his superpower was accuracy. His accuracy was similar to, some guys like Justin Fields, Mac Jones coming out of college. Obviously, their career didn't turn out exactly correctly, but they were highly touted at the time just to get a sense of, where he probably would have projected into the draft. His accuracy was similar to that, very high, one of the highest that we had in recent years here at Sumer Sports using our millisecond by millisecond accuracy ratings. The downside was the sacks, basically the opposite of Tyler Shough. Not a good pressure-to-sack ratio, took way too many sacks, and the worry was those negative plays. But Jaden Daniels, for example, struggled with sacks as well at LSU, was able to limit that last year. But all that to say, he's still projected to be a solid day 1 or day 2 quarterback. I think the side kind of bar that people didn't really expect is that if you look at these teams' rosters, there's 6 to 8 teams that are still evaluating quarterbacks on their rookie contract. That's an immensely high number historically. And as a result, only a few teams really needed quarterbacks. And I think they were kind of playing a game of chicken in day 1 and day 2 of who could kind of wait it out the longest and still get some good players at the other positions. The real question that I have is once you start getting to day 2, you can go ahead and select a backup quarterback and feel good about it. We've seen Jalen Hurts come off the board, Dak Prescott come off the board, and those ended up working out. I was kind of shocked that no one took the chance until the Browns way down the line. Talking about the Browns, obviously they have Dylan Gabriel. They liked him more. Politics aside, because there could be a lot of kind of ramifications of selecting Dylan Gabriel, then all of a sudden going and selecting Shedeur Sanders, but I think they're going to get their reps ironed out in rookie camp, see who they like, and continue evaluating reps into training camp. I think it'll be an excellent quarterback challenge. The one problem coming from teams, which people don't really think about, is there's only so many reps in training camp, and typically you want to give those to your top guys to get ready for the season. They have so many guys they're going to have to maybe reevaluate how they are going to set up those reps just to try to figure it out. But for the most part, I'm okay with, grabbing the value of Shedeur Sanders that deep in the draft, especially given he projected as a certified, kind of round 1, round 2 guy.
Sam, you mean there's no data for a Hall of Fame dad that likes to meddle in your business?
I came up in the basketball business, right? I worked with Langston Galloway, who has played for the Pelicans, is from Baton Rouge for years and years. And so I know a lot of people in that industry, and there's a lot of great Tulane alum in that industry as well. And so I was kind of asking around if they had seen something like this before. What kind of came up were two items, Bowl, for example, or the son of Manute Bowl, where there was kind of character concerns there, but it really had nothing to do with the relationship to his dad. That was one item that came up. And then the second one, obviously, was the Bronny James and LeBron James item, where there was real questions if someone selected Bronny, if LeBron would ask to go to that team. He ended up going to Lakers. I think it was wildly different there because Bronny really wasn't, he's a borderline NBA G League level guy. Also super high character. Everyone thought he was a good kid. He had a heart attack, which was a whole other thing. And LeBron, obviously, is still one of the best players in the league, so it was a totally different value calculation. But those were two items that did come up when I was asking around the industry of something similar to that. And frankly, neither of those guys were the level of prospect or the level of positional importance that Shedeur Sanders were at. So as I said, this is kind of a crazy event. I'm kind of shocked it went this far.
Going back to your computer background, one of the things I remember about that photo that I think a lot of people forget, Larry Warford is in it. Like you're talking about, you have all these players. That's Larry Warford was a Pro Bowler for that team. Like that's the type of offensive line you were looking at. Even the guys you forget about were Pro Bowlers.
Exactly.
So, I know you're a data guy, so I'm sure you have the numbers on this. What would you, if you have one or two for each, what would you say were the biggest steals of this draft? Not necessarily for the Saints, but just overall. And what were some of the biggest reaches of this draft?
Yeah, so we talked about the running back thing earlier. I think that was kind of a big reach. I would not advise as an analyst to go and get a running back Ashton Jeanty with pick 6. That's not saying it's not going to turn out well. There's just so much expectation. He basically has to be, a top 5 guy immediately. But then you look at what teams like the Ravens did, for example. Malachi Starks falls to them. They pick him up. They're going to put him in a big position to succeed. There was some, questions about why he was falling. Based on our metrics, there are some questions more than just pop up on the tape about his coverage ability, but I think they're going to put him in a position to succeed. And then, character concerns aside, for example, I know there's a lot around Mike Green, but just looking at the data, he was immensely effective, an excellent pressure rate. They end up picking him up, way, way, way down the line. So I think that was a pretty good get. And then let's talk about the trades a little bit as well. You look at the NFC South, the Panthers and the Falcons were highly active. I think it was a little bit of a push for that James Pierce trade. I think the Rams maybe pulled the wool over the Giants' eyes and then used that to kind of ask a lot of the Falcons as well. Giving up a next year first-round pick for the 26th pick in the draft seems pretty crazy, and now the Rams are positioned to basically replace Matthew Stafford immediately. That was kind of a reach. But then you look at what the Panthers did. I'm a little biased. My old boss, Eric Eager, now is their VP of Analytics. The trades up that they did what we like to call pick swaps. So there was a 4-for-4 pick swap that people were saying, it got to be easier than this. But the whole point of that is that both teams end up kind of getting the same value, but it's in different places. And so, for example, they end up getting Nick Scorton and Donovan they didn't end up giving Donovan Ezra-Raku, who is Princely Uman-Mielen from Ole Miss. And as a result, they fill a position of need and don't lose too much value. I like the trade that happened. So those were kind of the 4 items and 4 teams that I thought did a interesting job that caught my eye.
Sam, definitely love all the insights you give here. I want to give you a chance here. Let fans know out there, all the Hoodats that consider themselves to the football nerds, if you would say, what they can find at sumersports.com. I know great analytics stuff on your site.
Yeah, so we're actually coming out with a little documentary on Monday about former Saint Jonathan Casillas. From undrafted to unforgettable, you can check that out on all of our channels. We're going to have an excellent write-up on him, a really cool documentary. And if you want to learn a little bit more about a Saints legend and a member of that excellent Super Bowl team, check it out at Sumer Sports on Twitter, X, or sumersports.com. That's SUMER sports.com.
All right, and we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. Thanks again to Sam Bruckhaus for coming on. Again, former Tulane linebacker, data analyst for Sumer Sports. And one thing that, I thought he had a really good answer when I asked him about the throwaways, because I see a lot of people criticizing the throwaways for Tyler Shough. And I think part of that is we're used to watching college and watching guys like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels make these incredibly athletic plays and extend plays forever. Even Bo Nix used to do that in college, extend plays. I remember Bo Nix for Auburn against LSU. I remember vividly that game because he was just running around the entire game behind the line of scrimmage. They couldn't tackle him. And he was just finding guys downfield. He gets to the NFL and he's playing differently. He's throwing the ball away a lot. He's not taking sacks. And that's one of the reasons that Bo Nix was able to succeed immediately as an NFL starter. So when I see a guy like Tyler Shough who's throwing the ball away a lot, I don't overreact to that because I see understanding when to throw the ball away as an NFL trait. Now, you got to do it right. You got to do it at the right times. There are times you need to stand in there and take a hit. There are times you need to extend. There are times you need to roll out. But when that's where when I would compare Tyler in terms of NFL readiness to Bo, that's one of the main reasons. Because if you are a rookie quarterback, one of the things that makes it difficult for you to get on the field is I can't trust you to not destroy every third drive with a terrible, terrible sack. That's what Caleb Williams did last year. It's what I think NFL teams expect to see when Shedeur Sanders gets on the field. When you lead the NCAA in sacks, that's not a trend that typically goes away. That's not a trait that typically goes away. Guys who get sacked a lot in college tend to get sacked a lot in the NFL. So that's why when people say like, okay, I think Tyler should be reasonably ready to play as a rookie, that's one of the reasons, because you don't expect him to take a ton of sacks. And you go back to last year, what did you see when Derek Carr was on the field versus when Spencer Rattler was on the field? Like, people get mad at Derek Carr for throwing the ball away, but quarterbacks shouldn't be taking 8 sacks a game. It's really, really difficult to win taking 8 sacks a game, and you're almost definitely going to get hurt if you're getting hit that much. Whereas you saw Derek get sacked 8 times all season in the 10 games he played. So I think when we watch Tyler, I think it's important to understand, like, kind of narrowing his focus on, like, okay, I'm okay with throwing the ball away in these situations, right? And living to play another down in ways that rookie quarterbacks typically don't understand.
Yeah, my biggest thing right now with Shough, I'm so anxious to see this, joint partnership now with Coach Kellen Moore. Obviously, I think we know this is his pick. This is his quarterback that he wanted. So there's definitely those traits that Shough has that attracted Kellen to him. And we'll see how the two end up vibing and meshing with one another to form whatever this Saints offense is going to be. Because, I mean, right now with the state of the Saints and the uncertainty with Derek Carr, it sure feels like we're going to be seeing Shough week 1. But I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, if it ends up being Shough versus Rattler, I think it'll be Shough. Now, I think Spencer's going to put up a competition.
Sure.
Like, he's a competitive guy, but like you mentioned, like, this is Kellen's guy. And
right.
And I think, like, when I hear people analyzing the situation, when I hear people say, like, Mickey Loomis, pulled the trigger too soon, and Mickey blah blah
his
blah.
Fingerprints are all over this.
Like, yeah, like, it's like, do you really believe that? Because you're not taking Tyler Shough there if Kellen Moore is not 100% on board with Tyler Shough as his quarterback. So if you are of the person that believes in Kellen Moore and thinks that we should be trusting his insight and analysis at the quarterback position, then you should at least be saying, well, let's see what he has. Let's give him a shot. If you don't trust Kellen Moore, then that's your prerogative. But this is very much on him. This is not we are sticking you with Derek Carr and this guy, and you don't like either of them, but you're going to make it work. That's not the situation we are in. And I'm intrigued. And I'm fascinated. I don't even know what this offense is going to look like, right? None of us do. We haven't seen it. We're guessing based on, like, this is what the Eagles did last year. But what the Eagles did last year wasn't really what the Chargers did 2 years before that.
Right.
What the Chargers did and what the Eagles did wasn't really what the Cowboys did. So, like, who knows? Who's to say head coach Kellen Moore doesn't come in and have a very different looking offense than any of the 3 we've seen, or most likely some sort of combination of the 3 we have seen. So anyway, that's where I am on Tyler. And thanks again to Sam for all that insight. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, just like you said, great info from Sam. First time got to meet him. It was during Super Bowl on Radio Row, and love the stuff that he was putting out there, and definitely more in tune with Sumer Sports now, checking them out.
All right. Who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to be coming back kind of rolling through draft grades, talking about some of the grades that were really critical, some of the grades, the few grades that were very positive. There was only a handful, not many, but there were a handful. So we'll hear what both sides of the spectrum have to say and kind of see where do we land, that sort of thing. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. Hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, we will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. Woo-hoo! And coming at you one more segment. And we're going to break down, okay, what are all the draft grades? What are people saying about the Saints draft class? And, you know,
a 26-year-old rookie is a big hang up for people.
Yeah, no, definitely. But like the draft grades, one of my issue with draft grades, and let's preface this by saying, what do draft grades actually mean? Jack shit. They don't mean anything. I think it's telling that when you look at all these draft grades, and I have I think I found 18 of them. I know there's more out there, but 18 is enough to kind of get a good distillation.
Good sample size, right?
It's usually pretty telling that like the people who put out draft grades are not the people you would typically go to for draft analysis, right? Because like the Daniel Jeremiahs of the world understand that it's impossible to grade 32 draft classes. It's hard enough to have a good read on like 8, 10. You're telling me that immediately after the draft, you feel like you have a good handle on how every single team did to the point that you could grade it, when any GM in the NFL would tell you like they don't even grade their own draft classes until like 3 years down the line. So a guy like Daniel Jeremiah knows like, I'm not going to even put that out in the world because all it's going to be is screenshotted 2 years from now and thrown back at me because it is impossible for me to get it all right. And my whole stock in trade is being right about the draft. So you end up with like Pete Prisco, who you hear from like once a year, and it's this time of year, you know, and like all these, like you go through from outlet to outlet. Every single outlet seems to have their own draft guy. None of them are former players. None of them are former front office staff, but they have really strong opinions about stuff that just happened. But no, so what ends up being the driving force in so many of these grades is the value. It's where did you pick a guy? It's like the PFF grade, right? When you do your mock draft and they give you a grade immediately after, and it says like, well, you got an F for picking Tyler Shough at number 32, right? Well, guess what? I was right. So maybe that wasn't an F pick. So, I mean, they picked him at number 40. I traded up to get him because I thought that there would be a quicker run on quarterbacks. I was not anticipating the Shedeur Sanders fall. I wasn't anticipating, that a lot of the value kind of changing. You know, I thought Jackson Dart might go earlier, and then that would have put some pressure on the Saints to maybe go up and get their guy. That didn't happen. They stayed put at 40. But, like, that wasn't an F pick. That was the right pick. But because draft boards say he was lower,
right,
and this is their draft board, not the team's draft board, it's a bad value pick. And then when your picks are seen as bad value, you are going to get a low grade regardless of whether that guy ends up being a good pro. And that's the analysis you get from most of these outlets. Some I take a little bit more stock in than others, but let's just go through kind of the rundown first. And of the 18 draft grades I got in here, or at least in my collection, there was 1 A-, that was the highest grade, 3 Bs, 4 B-, 4 C+, 4 Cs, 2 D+, and the average was about a 78.4, which is kind of like the fringe, like C+, B- range.
Sure.
How do you feel about that as kind of the, where you land on this draft versus that average?
I would think that most teams, it's safe to go out and give a B to, because we talked about this. I haven't seen them do quite anything yet, and don't know how the Saints particularly rank certain people. I will say I found there wasn't many, if any, negative grades or thoughts on the Saints' first-round pick in Kelvin Banks Jr. at number 9 overall.
No, but again, people are like, they took him too early, which I always think that's funny. It's like, but you didn't have a pick later. You had a pick there.
Right.
So if he was the guy you wanted, and it's like, maybe he would have gone 12 otherwise.
How are you going to get him? Right.
Right. It's not like you could just wait until your next pick. So,
just trade down. It's that easy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Trade to whatever pick you think he's exactly going to go at. And then they go like, that's that's how these value tools operate. So that's why I don't put a ton of stock in them. But just for example, okay, so the D grades. Let's talk about what got these grades down to a D. Bleacher Report, Christopher Knox, D+. His, and this is a kind of a distillation, but he said, unfortunately, the Saints didn't do the best job of maximizing value early in the draft. And it's fair to wonder if taking Shough over quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe was a massive mistake. So again, it's not about whether they're good players. It's about whether they could have gotten a different player that was rated higher at those spots.
And that's
probably true. To be fair, that's probably true. But it's going to depend on whether these guys actually are any good or not.
But if you're going to drop them down to that D grade, it seems at least solely because of the Shough pick. That's ludicrous to me.
Yeah, you should have a better reason than the value wasn't exactly what it should have been. And there was more to their breakdown. If you want to go read it, it's on Bleacher Report. But it was mostly derived from, well, our draft board said this and they did this, thus bad pick. So, and I guess to be fair, if you're trying to analyze something, you should at least be consistent with your own analysis. So if you were low on the quarterback and they took him, then yeah, you would probably give him a bad grade. But I don't know why they were low on the quarterback. They didn't tell me that.
Yeah.
A lot of them say like, oh, he's too old. Okay. He got hurt. Okay. But is he a good quarterback? Anyway.
That's definitely, you pegged it right there. The age and injury history.
Yeah. Another one, Fantasy Pros, which I guess is tough to gauge because they're looking at it from a fantasy football perspective.
Sure.
Andrew Erickson, D+. He said, quote, this team should have just rolled into the season with Spencer Rattler in a full rebuild instead of messing around with second-round quarterback Tyler Shough. The track record of QBs hitting his range is almost non-existent. And I think they should have just taken Shedeur Sanders instead, especially knowing he would be available on day 3.
Well, I will say I got a little depressed on Sunday when you read off those second-round QB names.
Well, okay, I have a couple issues with this. One, when they took Tyler Shough, they didn't know Shedeur Sanders was going to be in the 5th round. So, like, the idea that they knew he was going to be available on day 3, I don't think a lot of people knew he was going to be available on day 3. They took Tyler Shough because they had a better grade on Tyler Shough, but they had no reason to think he would get out of the 3rd round. So that's just an example of, like, bad analysis. Second, the track record of hitting on QBs is not, in the 2nd round, is not virtually non-existent. It's about 1 in 3. Like we went through that list of 2nd round quarterbacks. No one's going to get super excited about Marcus Tuiasosopo, but you also have a Drew Brees in there, right? No one's going to get that excited about Jimmy Clausen, but you also have Jalen Hurts in there and a few others. Derek Carr was a 2nd round pick. I know everyone hates Derek Carr right now, but when you're talking about a 2nd round pick with a 10-year NFL career who's like 20th in all-time passing yards, that's a track record of finding a guy in the 2nd round. Jimmy Garoppolo was a 2nd round pick who didn't have a great career, but did go to a Super Bowl with the 49ers. Colin Kaepernick, copy and paste what I just said about Jimmy Garoppolo about Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Dino Smith is a 2nd round pick. So, there's been some, like, it's not like it's virtually non-existent is crazy to me when you're talking about 1 in 3, because even in the 1st round, you're talking about maybe 50% hit rate. So a 30% hit rate is lower, but it's not virtually non-existent. So the idea that you should just never take a quarterback in the 2nd round, that doesn't make sense to me as a point of analysis. And that's the point of analysis that dropped this grade to a D.
What's funny, this is the first time the Saints have done that, though, taking a quarterback in round 2.
It's true. It doesn't happen that often.
No.
There's been like 25 since 2000. So that kind of tells you that's less than 1 a year. And I think it makes sense because, like, if you get out of the 1st round, if you believe a quarterback is legit, typically you're not going to let that guy get out of the 1st round. In this case, I think the value kind of matched the point where it's like 9 overall was just not the right spot, but you did want him. So it was either like, if you had traded up to 31 and taken him, would that be functionally different than staying at 40? I would argue no, other than that you retained more assets and you kind of held water instead of giving up more. So in that sense, it was better value than it could have been, because I thought for the world they were going to try to trade up. I really did.
No, that's another thing with this draft. Bravo to the Saints for retaining all these picks and having those 9 selections. It's a huge draft class and, made our days a little bit longer, especially the last day of the draft with those last 2 picks they had to make. You're kind of just, waiting anxiously for them to get done. But when we're in this real rebuild mode, we talked about the more swings you take, the better you have a chance to get on base. So hopefully these selections, there's a high hit rate, and these guys end up, contributors for this team for some years to come.
Yeah. So let's look at the other end of the spectrum now. So New York Post, they gave the Saints an A-. Ryan Dunleavy, he said Shough is the Saints' first top 2-round quarterback draft pick since 1971. He's 25 years old and ready to play if Derek Carr is out for the season. That's what no one seems to get to, is like, yeah, he's older, but is he ready right now? Which I think there's value in that if that's the case. Now, it might not be the case, but if it is, there's value there. Banks was a late riser who started from day one at Texas. The Saints might have won rounds 3 and 4. So that's the other thing. People are talking a lot about the first 2 picks and kind of ignoring, I think the Saints really found some intriguing guys later in the draft, but it's tough because so much emphasis is placed on the first 2 rounds. But Ryan seems to think that's not necessarily a problem. And so that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. Now,
you mentioned that there. I found a lot of folks actually like, low key, the Saints had a pretty damn good day 3 of the draft.
Yeah. Well, even Mel Kiper, who he put the Browns as an A+ because, and I'll give him some credit. He stood on business because he had a come apart, a meltdown. He was going through it throughout the draft because he had Shedeur Sanders up high, and he was like, the NFL is idiots. What are they doing? And to be fair, a lot of people had him up high. So this slide was definitely about more than just football. But I don't think that the Browns drafting another quarterback and then coming back to take him in the 5th round should merit that much credit. But he gave them an A+. And I thought that was going to, you inverse that. You look at the inverse of that, and I thought maybe he was going to give the Saints a really low grade because the Saints were the only team that took a quarterback in the 2nd round. So they were the one that probably jump-started his slide beyond what it might have been if he probably blames the Saints for not being the reason Shedeur Sanders is a 2nd round pick. Still, he gave them a B-, which is not his lowest grade because, like you mentioned, he pointed to the day 3 selections as really strong picks. So that's interesting. Another guy who actually wasn't in my roundup, I couldn't find his, I need to go back and look, was Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports, who I think he said he had an A.
Yep.
For the Saints. So this is him talking about his grades.
Alvin Banks, we know exactly what he's going to do. Ryan Ramczyk is retired. Trevor Penning, 5th-year option, not picked up, and he has struggled. Looking down the board there, I love Jonas Sanker out of UVA. They didn't have a lot of things to be excited about at UVA football last season, but Jonas Sanker was one of them. Danny Stutzman, got some run as a top 50 guy early in the fall, and then Quincy Riley is a get-after-it, undersized cornerback who plays really tough. And Devin Neal, talked to him at the Senior Bowl, ran to the 4.5s. He plays much quicker than that. So they're adding pieces, and this team is certainly better than they were. But the question, of course, as I give them A-, is who the quarterback's going to be.
A-.
Yeah, no, I mean, A- is right there. No, and I think that's, that's a bold, it's tough for me to see an A if you don't believe in the quarterback. So I think he might be even being a little bit too generous because I'd put this in the B range. I think it's if Shough ends up being a legit player, then you have a chance to climb into the A range. If he doesn't, then this falls into the C range for me. But
I'm guessing because that late value, maybe the Saints got, he felt with some of these picks, like a Neal, because he was very high on him.
Yeah, if you pull 4 starters out of this draft that aren't named Tyler Shough, that's still a really good draft.
Right.
But you missed a chance to add a stud player in the 2nd round if Tyler Shough isn't one of those players. If you add 4 starters and your future quarterback, then this is an elite draft, and you are an A. So that's where I have a little bit of an issue. And one of my problems is, for years, one of the points that people have been making about the Saints is they don't make enough picks. They don't make enough picks. They don't maximize their value by holding on to their picks. They're always trading forward. They traded forward every year since 2013. Well, they didn't this year. Yet as I go through 18 different draft grade articles, I did not see once anyone applauding them for making 9 draft picks. So which is it? Are we mad at them for not making enough picks? Or are we still going to be mad at them for making a lot of picks because they're not the ones that you had graded there? Like, you would think that to some degree, there would be this appreciation for the Saints operated differently. They maximized their pick selections instead of maximizing the number of the draft slot. But no, I haven't heard that once. So
no, the biggest damning factor is definitely the Shough, how that analyst perceives the quarterback who really wasn't getting, I felt, that buzz until the final week.
Yeah, and I've seen most of the people I've seen, most of the analysts I've seen are positive on picks in rounds 3 through 7. I've seen some folks say like, well, they could have got someone higher than Vernon Broughton. Like Vernon Broughton might have been a little bit of a reach, but you did have really good intel on him. You know, Archie Manning, it really talked up the Kelvin Banks pick. He obviously knows that Texas offense pretty well. He talked to Arch about it. So you can quibble on the value in a few of these picks, but at the end of the day, again, it's like, how many impact quality players are you going to bring in? And if the answer is 4 to 5, then anything below a B is kind of a crazy analysis point. But we don't know what those drafts are going to be at this point. And I'm going to be fair to these draft heads who put out these grades every year and see what they said about the 2017 draft class. Because I assure you, that was not getting A's across the board at that point.
Right. It's curious. Like you said, now I do want to go back and see what did they make of a pick like Alvin Kamara in round 3.
Okay, let's just find one off the top of my head. This is from 2022. See, that's what they like to do. They like to go back and say, let's regrade.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
But they never correct themselves. Okay, here's Mel Kiper on the Saints 2017 draft. Gave it a B. Gave it a B. Which, you know, he gave this draft a B. The Saints had an extra first-round pick because they traded Brandon Cooks to the Patriots for the number 32 pick overall. Noted at the top because Cooks has blah, 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 blah. With 2 first-rounders, you really have to be looking for a couple players with the ability to make an impact relatively soon, especially for a team coming off third straight 7-9 season. And I think the Saints got that done. Marshawn Lattimore comes with what I call an orange flag, not quite red because of lingering hamstring issues.
Wow.
But if he's healthy, he's the top cornerback in the draft. So this is a pretty good assessment of that top pick. Ryan Ramczyk is a reasonable selection at number 32, given that left tackle Teron Armstead has dealt with injuries and right tackle Zach Strief is almost 34. Man, this is like a time capsule.
Yeah.
Ramczyk has the ability to play right away, better if it's on the right side, but he also carries some risk as his hip has been a problem. The second was a priority, and Marcus Williams isn't a far cry from what Malik Hooker brings and much further down the road. A big question mark here was the value given up to draft Alvin Kamara. Again, we talk about value and not the player. Even if you question any possibilities between 2017 for Mark Ingram or Adrian Peterson, trading a second rounder to move up and take my number 88 overall player is iffy.
Wonder how we feel about that now.
I like Alex Anzalone if he's healthy. A potential steer here is Trey Hendrickson. So there's some really good analysis points in there. But then there's a really bad analysis point in there, which is, oh, you didn't get a good value on Alvin Kamara, who ended up being the best pick of anyone in this class.
Well, so if Mel gave that draft a B and gave this year's draft a B, I'm feeling pretty good about the Saints haul.
I'll give Mel credit. I give Mel a lot of grief. He hit that, you know, you're not going to get it perfect every time. He hit that one pretty well. Everything but the Alvin Kamara point, which even then, yes, I can understand quibbling with the value. In retrospect, it seems silly, but they did give up a second round pick, which is significant. What I'll say is, hey, Saints nailed it. So,
for sure.
You know, if you nail it, the value doesn't matter. And that's kind of my point. Like, we won't be talking about, wow, they drafted Tyler Shough at 40 if he is your starting quarterback for the next 8 years. Let's see one more. I want to find someone that gave the Saints a bad grade. It can't be Chad Reuter because Chad Reuter gives everyone B's. Like a bad grade, like B- was the lowest grade. He gave the Saints the lowest grade he gave out, but it was a B-.
I like that teacher.
Oh, Pete Prisco. That's a perfect one because Pete's a dick.
Okay. I'm sure Tampa's draft grade will be high for Pete.
August 30th, 2017. Oh, April 30th, 2017. So this is it. Let's see. New Orleans Saints. You gave him a B. They probably thought they had no chance to get Ohio State Marshawn Lattimore when the draft started, but they ended up getting him in the 11th spot. That was a nice pick off the top corner. I didn't love the pick of Wisconsin tackle Ryan Ramczyk with the 32nd pick. He has some medical issues, and is that really a major need? Yes. What are you talking about? He started from day one. He was the starting right tackle as a rookie. Was that a major need?
What sucks is even Mel brought up, I guess it was a hip, and ended up being the knee that did Ramczyk in.
Sure, but a lot of these guys have health issues in college. It doesn't always translate. But this is it's similar to how people are talking about Kelvin Banks right now. Of like, well, did you need him? Like, yeah.
Yes.
Like, I don't know exactly where he's going to play right now, but yes, we needed Kelvin Banks, just like you needed Ryan Ramczyk for that period of time. You would have loved it if Ryan Ramczyk was still around, but the fact that he's not is why you need a Kelvin Banks. Anyway, let's see. He has some medical issues, and is that really a major need? But they added some nice players later in the draft. Utah safety Marcus Williams. I completely forgot he went to Utah in the second round, and pass rusher Troy Hendrickson.
Yeah,
Troy. Troy. Troy Hendrickson. I'm not sure I know who that is. I also think third down linebacker Alex Anzalone from Florida has a chance to be a long-term starter if he stays healthy. That's a big if based on his career. So it's interesting. Like
everyone nailed the Anzalone.
He didn't even mention Alvin Kamara. That wasn't even a factor for him. That was such a non-factor that he was like, I'll leave it out. Anyway, okay. One more. Do you have anyone off the top of your head that you want to try for a 2017 comp?
What's ever happened to who was the other guy that was always on ESPN? Oh, Todd McShay. What the heck is he up to?
I don't know. See, I don't know what his grades were. He's doing he's doing his own thing now.
What's that? Okay.
But he doesn't see. But he's a good example of someone who doesn't put out draft grades because he knows better.
Okay.
Or at least not like now that ESPN isn't forcing him to do it.
It was kind of funny how he just kind of disappeared.
Okay, let's go to Chad Reuter because he's been doing it forever, so we at least know he's there. Maybe he was a little more critical back in the 2017s, back before the rise of AI chatbots, and he gave him an A-.
Whoa!
So he gave him a good grade. Lattimore is the best cover man in the draft and a no-brainer at number 11. It's interesting that but here's a good example because no one is talking about getting leapfrog for Pat Mahomes at this point.
Right.
And it's just a good example of why these snap grades are worthless, because one of the things that you would have to talk about now, if you were assessing the 2017 draft, is that Pat Mahomes might be the best quarterback of all time. And the Saints wanted him and didn't get him because the Chiefs traded ahead of him.
Right there.
So right now, Pat Mahomes is getting I'm not going to say the Tyler Shough treatment, but he's getting kind of overlooked in this draft that had Mitchell Trubisky at the top and Deshaun Watson was in there. And so, but people are looking at it like, well, the Saints dodged a bullet by not wasting a pick on Pat Mahomes. And instead they got Marshawn Lattimore, who's a great pick, great value, Anyway. So yeah, Lattimore is the best cover man in the draft, a no-brainer at number 11. Then instead of continuing to bolster the defense, they improved the offensive line by picking up and coming left tackle Ryan Ramczyk. That's not how I would have described him, but they should have helped their defensive front instead. They did. They got Trey Hendrickson later in the draft. It's interesting that he's that critical with an A-, but that's a good example of Chad Reuter, because Chad Reuter, an A- is like a medium grade for him. That's not it. Let's see if I can find one more. Let's see Yahoo. Oh, you know who was the Yahoo writer at this point?
Who was it?
Eric Edholm.
Funny. All right. Yeah. Man, he's been everywhere.
Friend of the program. He writes for NFL Network now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, it's a slideshow. Oh,
those are fun. That sounds like something Bleacher Report would do.
This is a very 2017 way to disseminate this information. Like, people would not do this now because everyone was trying to, and I'll tell you why they did it this way. And this is not about football. This is about digital page view bullshit, because the way that they used to track page views, it would make it so if you put a carousel of photos, it would be like every single click registered as a page view. And then, the internet got smart enough to register this as one page view, and it's never happened again.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really? Okay,
That's
so
why
the
it stopped
slideshow is just one view now.
Yes. And like the act of actually having to click through this entire slideshow is enough of an annoyance to make me never come back.
Right.
I have to click this 25 times because it's just like they feel like, oh, we gamed the system. And now it's like, oh, well, it's not gaming the system anymore. You gave him a B. So, I mean, like people were reasonably high on this draft class at the time.
Yeah.
But no one's given this an A+. No one's saying like, this has a chance to be the best draft class of anybody. No one's saying
franchise
that.
changing, right?
No one's saying that. They're all saying like, oh, the value on a lot of these picks was really good. You got great value on Marshawn Lattimore. Yeah. And you did, to be fair, like he was a great pick. Best pick. Anytime a team can nab a potential top 5 pick outside the top 10, it's a win. Even with some extenuating circumstances, this was a very good choice. If Lattimore can stay healthy after a history of chronic soft tissue injuries, he could be a top 10 corner in the NFL. The Saints haven't had that of late and badly need to cover the big and fast receivers of the NFC South. Managing his health, to be fair, that's true at that point. Julio Jones was around. Managing his health will be key, but Lattimore has everything a team wants and an alpha dog cover guy. Good analysis. Worst pick. Anzalone has skills and they were on display during a fruitful Senior Bowl week, but he has also been an injury-prone player and far more as of late. Anzalone fits the mold of an athletic, big-framed offensive linebacker prospect and special teamer that Sean Payton favors. Anzalone's shaky medical history, blah, blah, blah. So I guess Anzalone, but yeah, that probably was their worst pick. And he's still pretty good.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through everything from that year. There's got to be something else in there that, I mean, Anzalone's still contributing.
Yeah. Here's the analysis. Someone finally mentioned Pat Mahomes.
Uh-oh.
This is one of the most bizarre hauls of the draft. The Saints wanted Pat Mahomes and Reuben Foster. Everyone talks about the Saints wanting Pat Mahomes, but they never mentioned Reuben Foster. So I appreciate you brought that up. Like everyone's like, we wanted to go get Pat Mahomes. Like, yeah, but you also wanted to trade up to get that guy who had off the field issues and never was anything. Anyway, Reuben Foster. And those selections would have garnered a higher grade. So if they'd landed Reuben Foster, you would have been better with this class. Definitely Pat Mahomes for sure. In terms of the talent for the group they selected, we liked the picks, almost every single one of them. But what is happening at running back? Could the Saints have used a receiver? I think they're fine with Alvin Kamara in that slot. Was Mahomes the only quarterback they liked? Will they regret missing out on one of those first 2 players and getting an offensive lineman and Ryan Ramczyk, who might not play immediately?
Ouch, that one hurts.
These are a few questions the Saints left us. So all that is to say,
nobody knows anything.
Like, even I'll give these guys credit for being positive on this draft class at the time. But you didn't have guys coming out and saying this is an A class. You didn't have guys coming out saying like this is going to be a draft class we look back to as a franchise-altering draft class.
Yeah.
So when I see people right now saying what a terrible value class, take it with a grain of salt. That is the distillation of this entire segment. Take it with a grain of salt.
Do you feel like the results of Tyler Shough will almost dictate how this class is viewed overall? I think too, just because it was a second round pick this year.
I think, yeah, if it was a top 5 pick, yes, absolutely. It's not. It's a second round pick. I think Tyler Shough's career is going to swing this grade higher or lower. Like it probably of all the picks in this draft, that one has the ability to swing it up high or swing it down a little lower. But if the only pick that doesn't pan out in your top 5 is Tyler Shough, you can still have a successful draft class. But I think the peak, if Tyler Shough is not, if he just ends up being, say, a high level backup, the peak is a B+. And that would require, Devin Neal in the 6th round to be a really solid pick, which it could be. Jonas Sanker to be a big time contributor like a CJ Gardner-Johnson, right? Danny Stutzman to be, I mean, like a contributor at linebacker. Quincy Riley to be a starting outside cornerback, right? Kelvin Banks to be your cornerstone left tackle for the next 8 to 10 years. If you got all that, and then hey, maybe one of your 7th round picks is a contributor in some way. If you get all that, then yeah, you're still talking about B+ class, but that's the ceiling. Now, if Tyler Shough hits as your starting quarterback for a while, your floor is probably a B. If you missed on these mid-round picks. If Jonas Sanker ends up being Saquon Hampton, or Malik Imanov ends up being Alizé Mack, or Danny Stutzman ends up being DeMarco Jackson, right? So like that's where I see it. Like it can be. It's not like if Tyler Shough is good, it's a good grade. If Tyler Shough's bad, it's a D. But it is going to be a very important piece in the when we look back.
Shuck it up.
Shuck it up. Let's shuck this up.
Cannot wait for all the plays on the name Shuck this year.
I mean, the first bad game, the first like game blowing interception he throws, shucks is going to be everywhere. But I think it's kind of like Burrow with the O, with EAUX. Like I kind of feel like it could end up being, if he's good, it's the type of thing that will be endearing and we'll be able to use it in a lot of different fun ways to I think I used Shuck It in our like cover art for the draft recap episode.
Yeah.
Which like that's fun when he's good. If he's bad, it will be like Shuck this. And people are like, oh, got him. It's like used car puns, right? Like when Derek Carr's good, you can be like, oh, it's the Maserati, or like Alvin Kamara. I remember one of my first headlines with him, like a souped up Kamara, right?
Yeah.
But if he's bad, it'd be like, oh, that broken down, whatever. He's a lemon, shit like that. So like it can go both ways. Ian Book, everyone was really having a great time with the Ian Book ones.
Right.
And then he ended up being what we know Ian Book was. And
the book was closed.
The book was closed. And we don't talk about any great stories from that time. So
it did not happen.
Anyway, all right. You got anything else?
No, just can't wait to get out to rookie minicamp and see more of these guys get to know them a little bit more. Because like I said, I just don't feel, you get to see enough on-field stuff then, obviously. It's really early on. But just a little more of these guys' personality and how they're adapting to life in the pros.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like usually I'll try to get an interview with basically every main
good luck,
like every draft pick. I don't think it's going to be enough time to do that this year. So yeah, like we might have to pass it. I guess we'll talk to Fadil Diggs at some point. We haven't talked to him yet.
Right.
So that probably happened this week at some point. But
the lone pick we have not heard from.
Yeah, that's what happens when you go 254 in the draft. They don't even get you on the phone. But all right, who dat? Go Saints. This is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone for getting all the way to the end. Excited to get this. We're in year 4 of this podcast, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, we're rolling. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. Appreciate everyone who leaves comments, who chimes in, who hits me up on social media. I know Steve met someone in a grocery store once who listens to the podcast. That's always very humbling that people listen at all. So
that and the fact it's like you recognize me. What you kind of forget the medium that we have.
You kind of forget like this is not just a conversation we're having between each other.
Right.
Anyway, all right. Who dat? Go Saints. Be easy, y'all.
Shuck it up, y'all.
Let's shuck it up.